I'm a registered nurse, and I worked in the area in North Carolina for about 20 years. Before North Carolina, I worked in Baltimore for another 30 years, so I've been a nurse for a while. I've done a lot of different kind of things. Right now I'm teaching with the nursing assistant program. In fact, I'm a coordinator for the nursing assistant program. And we produce about 150 nursing assistants in this area per year. So you might know that there's still a shortage of nursing assistants and nurses. So if this is an area that you think you might be interested in, then I won't miss taking this opportunity to have you come and join us. What I thought I'd talk about today was when you get to that point and you have a loved one at home. It could be a family member, it could be a husband or wife or mother, father, it could be uncle or aunt or even a neighbor that you'd like to help. And they're in the home and they may need some help, but you don't know what you're supposed to do or should do at that point. So that's primarily what we're going to focus on today. We can be very informal, and I encourage you to stop and ask any questions that you might have, okay? Okay, but let me start this afternoon by just sharing a very true story with you, especially today because it is the 6th anniversary of the death of the subject of this story. Let's just call her Lee. In 1991, Lee was 71 years old. She was healthy and happy, and she was traveling with her husband and really beginning to enjoy her retirement. She had taken good care of herself. She never had diabetes or hypertension or some of those chronic diseases. So she thought that she would enjoy a long life and enjoy the travel with her husband. It hadn't been very long in the year, right after the winter months, that she contracted a cold, or she thought it was the flu. But after hospitalizations and the first diagnosis of pneumonia, she ended back up in the hospital with final diagnosis of emphysema. If you don't know, emphysema is a lung disease. It's a chronic, debilitating lung disease. Usually emphysema is caused by smoking, or that's one of the symptoms, smoking, or someone who works in, say, a miner that works in a mine or something like that can have those kinds of lung problems. Well, Lee and her family ended up really in denial for some years because Lee had never smoked, she had never drank. In fact, Lee did not have any of the classic kind of signs of this disease. She was, after all, a Christian, church-going lady who never partied and never drank. So she couldn't understand why she had this disease. And for several years, they ignored that this disease existed, even though she took her medication as directed by the doctor. And she continued to go see other doctors to seek second opinions. By the 5th year, the disease had begun to weaken her body, causing her to lose her autonomy and become homebound. Each additional year and each additional hospitalization saw her become more debilitated and eventually dependent for all of her care. Although her husband and her 2 daughters did what they could to please Lee, she was angry and bitter about her lost years and the hand that life had dealt her. Lee did not graciously accept the care that was given her. Sometimes we think that when a person gets older and they need care, that they're going to accept that care and be very happy that someone is giving them care, but many times that's not what happens. A person can become very bitter and angry and take that bitterness and that anger out on the very ones who's trying to do their best to help them. And that happens very frequently. So one daughter, this is what happened with her family as the need for care increased with Lee. She was hospitalized several times, and her husband began to become very frail himself in trying to take care of her. One of her daughters gave up her apartment and moved back home to help care for her mother in the evenings. And one of the daughters, who lived a long distance away, took family medical leave from her job so that she could come home and give some respite care to her father and to her sister. By the last year or so of Lee's life, The younger daughter had become so overwhelmed with the care of her mother that she ran away from home, not letting her family even know where she was. The husband became very ill with heart problems himself. And the older daughter, who did what she could do, felt guilty a lot of the time for being away and not supplying more care and more help to the family and not doing more. There was talk throughout the nursing home, throughout the home, about nursing home placement as Lee's needs became more and more as they increased. They eventually admitted they needed help and was able to get services in. Those services began to make the difference. It was still a long, hard struggle, but with help, Lee did die at home on October the 29th. This is my story. This is the story about my mother. So I tell you this story not just today as being a registered nurse, but having experienced this personally and how hard it is on families who has somebody who changes, who becomes dependent. Okay? I wanted you to know my story because although I'm a registered nurse, I do not have all of the answers. And I also want you to know that when it's you being put in that position, even if you do have some skills or you know some things, it is totally different when it becomes a family member for you. It becomes very personal to you. It's really hard to kind of pull back and remember all those things sometimes that we learn in school or that you might know to apply to somebody else. But when it's your family, your own family, it becomes much more difficult. What my experiences have shown me is almost no one is really prepared for these situations, whether dependence happens gradually or over the years or rapidly because of disease. We are usually thrown head first into a situation where we feel that we must react, we must do something. The number one concept that if you don't remember anything else today, that you should walk away with is that you are not alone. There are services out there to help you. And that's what I really want you to know. And that's what sometimes we forget, that there are services, there are people out there that can really help you get through that situation. Okay? Okay, now do I have the answer as far as the phone number that you can call, that you can get services round the clock for free? No. You know, so often that's what you need, but that's not always the case. That's not what you're going to find in our society, not right now. But what we do have is enough information and services that will help you to pull together your family, your friends, your church members, along with some of the services that the community offers that may help you to make some real decisions that may allow a person to stay at home for a period of time, if that is the right answer. There are many different types of agencies that do different things, but one main number that you should have is the AOA, and that means that's short for Area on Aging, or Administration on Aging, I'm sorry. That's in Washington, D.C. If you want to write that down, the number is, the address is 2021. I'm sorry. Let me go back. It's Administration on Aging, Washington, D.C. The phone number is 202-401-4541.
Could you repeat that?
Yes, ma'am, I can. It's called Administration on Aging, Washington, D.C. And the area code is 20201. And then the phone number is 202-401-4541. Okay, and if you want the email address, I have that as well if you'd like to come and get that later. But from this website, you can access or find out what's available all over the United States, because sometimes we're not just in our county or looking for help in our county. Many times we're looking for help outside of our own state or the state that we live in. Okay, and one of the things that I brought over here is local information on the resources on aging area office in Guilford County. They can also give you a lot of information about the different resources that are available here in Guilford County. So if you want to pick up any of those booklets over there before you leave. So let's just discuss a few scenarios today. The kind of concerns that most people have, the things that I've seen that have happened mostly, kind of the most frequently asked questions. Say, for instance, someone's parent or parents are okay. They seem to be pretty much okay, but they're wondering if they really should continue to live alone because of forgetfulness. Maybe they find that they've had a little fire, or they're looking to see scorched pans all the time, which is an indication that the food was left on the stove, that forgetfulness, they're beginning to forget to turn off appliances. And that is really serious. Or maybe you find that the doors are unlocked, main doors are left unlocked. What you are actually asking is, how do you know when your loved one can no longer live on his own? Some of the things that you see, you begin to see, or some of the signs that might indicate that a change is needed, is that that person is also having difficulty eating. They're having difficulty maybe sleeping, difficulty getting dressed and toileting. Maybe they're forgetting to take medications. Or perhaps the other end is that they're taking too many medications because they forgot that they took it and they repeat it. They may be behaving in ways that could be hurtful to themselves or to others, such as forgetting to turn off those appliances, not just the stove and the burners, but it may even be an iron or a heater. Sometimes, and we've all heard the instances of older people wandering out of the home and on the road and wandering away and being lost. So that's also indication of memory loss and confusion. Okay, so you say, well, okay, I see that. I see that happening, so what do I do? So the first thing that you would want to do is, what would you want to have done for you? What do you think? Really? Would you want to?
Oh, no. We'll be talking. Some kind of conversation.
A discussion. So you'd want to discuss it with that person first. So in the beginning, what should take place is a real honest discussion. Listen, I'm seeing this. I'm really concerned about this because I'm concerned for your safety. So it should be an honest discussion about what you're seeing. And you should list those kind of things that are giving you concern. Okay? Do you think that the first time you talk about those things that a person is going to say, okay?
No.
No, that's right. Most of the time, the first time that you try to discuss that, you're going to meet resistance. You go, no, well, anybody can do that. A person normally is going to be resistance for taking some responsibility that maybe I'm forgetting. You know, everybody's forgetful. Everybody can forget something. You know, so you're going to hear that the first time. You're going to meet some resistance. You can, one of the things when I was reading over this and trying to just kind of get some better ideas to share with you, is that all of my books say that you really should be careful about who you choose to have that talk. You know, maybe it should be you, but maybe it should be somebody else. But it shouldn't be, it should be somebody that the person trusts and has some respect for. It may not be your most opinionated, boisterous member of the family. So it may not be the patriarch or the loudest speaking son to talk to the mother. It may be the daughter, you know, that the mother has a closer relationship and can be kinder with what needs to be said. So you should really choose carefully about who has that conversation, because it should be a very kind conversation.
Excuse me. I have experienced some of this with my deceased husband, but what I did was to talk with the doctor. I had a consultation with the doctor prior to his appointment with the doctor. And the doctor was the one that he trusted because we had it for 20 years.
Absolutely. You know, the thing about it is that when I say I don't have all of the answers, we can't give you specific answers because every family member is different. Different families are different. You know, women are different from men. Most of the time, women will listen, and I don't mean to stereotype, but it does say, the statistics say that women will listen a little bit more to family members, where men tend to be a little bit more resistant of giving up that autonomy than women do. And they usually listen more to other men or to their doctors, and sometimes even to lawyers, more than they will listen to their families about different issues.
And I think sometimes we're afraid to call a doctor unless we see a symptom. Because when I called the nurse the first time, she said, consultation, what's wrong? I said, consultation. She said, we don't get calls for consultation. I said, well, that's what I want. So you have to, it's good if you have someone who can give a voice.
That's good. I think that's very good. So you had talked about the doctors, going to the doctor, or a doctor seeing a doctor. And sometimes the doctor, it depends on the person. The doctor's not home with the person, but the family members are home, and they actually see what that person is forgetting to do or what's going on. So some people may trust what their doctor says, where other people might want to hear it from a family member, or will be more receptive from a family member. Okay, so everybody's different. So you have to find whatever you think will work for your loved one, and which will be the kindest way of finding a solution to at least beginning that discussion with that family member. It should be someone that the individual trusts and values their opinion. So pay attention to the individual's concerns. What is your loved one saying to you when you're telling them that they're not doing, or they're having some problems and with forgetfulness? Pay attention to what their concerns are. Or do they think that you're saying that they're crazy? And many people will think that. Do they think that you're saying that they no longer can take care of themselves? And what is the biggest thing with most people? I mean, what do we all value most? Our independence. So nobody is going to give up their independence. Normally, nobody will give up their independence, just give it up. We're all going to be somewhat resistant to giving up our independence. So we have to make sure that they understand that we're not necessarily talking about them giving up their independence. We're talking about safety. So change is difficult at any age, but it's even more for the elderly. I know that as I get older, the older I get, the harder it is for me to deal with changes. I like things to kind of stay the same. So as we get older, it is harder for us to change. But if you are afraid the individual could harm himself or others, and there is a safety risk, you might need to finally call Adult Protective Services. That should be your final, the last straw. That shouldn't be just something that you go to, because that's going to make that individual extremely resentful. But you have to be, you have to be protective and make sure that they don't hurt themselves or injure themselves and other people. You should remain calm and honest and seek solutions that the individual is comfortable with, like getting help for some of the solutions, like Meals on Wheels, maybe instead of that person cooking at home. Church members that can bring food in, or family members that can bring food in instead of having the person cook on the stove. Maybe now they can just heat up in a microwave. Some type of solution that might solve the problem. Many times assistive devices may lengthen the time that an individual can remain safely in the home. Everybody know what an assistive device is? Well, for all of us, our glasses are an assistive device. It actually helps to it replaces something that you lost along the way. So, so many people, when they can't walk as well, or they're falling at home, they may need walkers. They may need wheelchairs. They may need some type of assistive device that can still help them to be in the home and be safe in the home. They may need seat lifts that help them to get up out of a chair to keep from falling. It helps to keep from falling. Or rails in the bathroom. One of the biggest things that happens in the home situation is falls. That's the number one high risk thing in a home for the elderly. And when they fall, they don't mend as well. As we get older, we don't mend as well. So many times when they fall, they've got brittle bones already, and they are breaking a hip or some major bone, and that's going to make them heal slowly. So we want to try to prevent that if we can by looking around the home first and removing all of those scatter rugs and looking into anything that might cause a fall ahead of time to try to prevent that. We can try to prevent a fall. Assistive technology, I want to talk a little bit about assistive technology, is any service or tool that helps the elderly or disabled do the activities that they have always done, but must now do differently. These tools are also sometimes called adaptive devices. And I just want to tell you, I've been a nurse for, like I said, almost 30, 40 years, and they have made so many changes in the adaptive devices. Now they have, and I just cut some things out, adaptive switches, kind of like the remote controls. These switches can moderate or adjust air conditioners, computers, telephone answering machines. They can power wheelchairs and other types of equipment, and sometimes they are just activated by voice or even by the tongue. Okay, so there are a lot of things, a lot of different types of equipment. There's transportation assistive devices now, devices that the elderly can use on their automobiles, on their cars, or trucks to drive more safely, such as adjustable mirrors, seats, steering wheels, and services that help the elderly maintain and register their vehicles, even at DMV, where they just have drive-through lines. So there's assistive devices there. Tools for independent living, anything that empowers the elderly to enjoy the normal activities of daily living. And they've made things like things that help to pull on shoes and boots and stockings and all kinds of different types of assistive devices. So sometimes if there's a need for that, and you call physical therapy, occupational therapy, the doctor can set some appointments up to do something like that. Okay, what can I learn more? Where can I learn more about assistive technology? I'm going to give you a web address, if you want to write that down. If you'd like to know more about assistive technology, is abledata.com. The one thing about assistive devices is that, yes, they can be costly, but one place for that you can try to seek some help and payment is the Veterans Administration if that person has been a veteran. And then you can call for your Medicare benefits as well. While we were talking about those assistive devices with transportation, I think that one of the hardest privileges for us to relinquish in our society has been a person's right to drive. Everybody likes to drive, and once they drive, and sometimes that's been one of the hard areas to get a person to realize that maybe they shouldn't drive anymore. Okay. Generally, you will meet a lot of resistance, again, with men in this area. And I've had experiences where family members have hid the keys, put the cars up on blocks, tried to do everything to keep somebody from driving that really should not be behind, or the family thinks that they should not be behind the wheel. We've discussed some of the warning signs about a person who may not be living, who may need to have some help in the home, or changes happen in the home. But we can discuss some of the things that we need to know about a person, those signs of whether a person should drive any longer. I'm trying to find it there. I guess I'll get to that a little bit later. Let me just go ahead and talk about driving a little bit more. Sometimes a person can continue to drive, but perhaps you might need to change the driving. We might need to change it where they're, instead of driving all over or drive any place where they want to go, they only drive in their immediate community. this gentleman said he was with his phone in the last class?
Nothing was turned in here.
Is it something like this? Okay, so sometimes the person may be able to, you could make a concession where that person may be okay to drive in the immediate community. That may be safer than, say, getting on the highway and driving. They could drive to the grocery store or to church, to the barber shop, to meet there and run their errands in their immediate community in an area that they're very familiar with, rather than driving on the highways or areas where they're not familiar. So some of the things that I can remember is that they may get, if you notice that the person is getting moving violations, and you should ride with them. You should get in the car and actually ride with them, so you really know if they're getting moving violations, if they're stopping where there's no stop sign, if you notice there's dents on the car, dents in the mailbox, on the garage doors, those kind of things, that you know that there's beginning to be some problem with their driving. So depending on how serious that is, you have to make a decision on what you want to do about it. Okay, again, the first place to start is by having a discussion and telling a person how serious you think that is, and you're concerned about their safety. Some of the other things that might be able to happen, again, is to have that person see a doctor, and there are evaluations that a doctor can do to find out whether or not that person can continue to drive, their vision evaluations, as well as at DMV. And DMV can conduct a driving test on a person to see if they're still able to drive safely. So some of the families do, when they feel that the person cannot drive, they take the keys, they take some component of the motor so that the car won't start, they hide the battery. As I said, I remember some sons that put the car up on blocks and took all the wheels off. But people can be very resourceful, and sometimes they'll go back and they'll find that battery or get another one or get some new wheels, and they're out there again. So if you think that the person is really unsafe to be on the road, and you know this, and they're very resistant to stop driving, the last thing that you can do, and this is the most harsh, is to actually call DMV and let them know and tell them about it, and then that person may be called in and have to take that driving test again. And if they don't pass that driving test, then they will not continue to have their license. So I think it's a whole lot easier to actually take the car when a person does not have a license and cannot get a tag, but that's pretty harsh. These are sometimes harsh decisions that you have to make, but when it depends on somebody's life, sometimes you have to do it. And it's not just their life. If they're driving, they're putting other people at risk and danger as well. One of the things that before when you start talking about driving and a person's ability to drive and get around, then they're going to ask questions like, they're going to have questions, well, how am I going to get here? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And there should be some plans on how those things are going to be done, how they're going to do their grocery shopping, how they're going to get to the doctor, how they're going to go to the cleaners in the grocery store. So you should plan those things ahead and make some concessions on how they're going to do those things. So now you know that this family member is needing to have some help at home. They need to have some help, so you know you've gotten some of the things that you're going to look at that you can plan. Now what do? There are different kind of things that you can do to help your person. One option is that you can get help in the home and continue them at home. And that's, of course, that's the option that most often that people really want. They want to stay in their homes. So you want to dial those numbers and get caught up with those services. Sometimes a nursing assistant in the home, if the person is in hospice, they can get, hospice will also pay for a nursing assistant if they're going to receive palliative care in the home. Sometimes insurances will pay for a nursing assistant. If a person has Medicaid, they're eligible for what's called a PCA. That's a personal care assistant. That person can come to the home and help them with things like bathing. The biggest thing with PCA and that medical assistant is that that person must need assistance with bathing. And a lot of times a person will say, well, I need just a little bit of help around the house to keep the house picked up. But I can bathe myself. Well, the state won't pay for a housekeeper. But they will pay for somebody when they need to have care for their assistance in getting dressed, in their hygiene, keeping up their hygiene, getting dressed and things like that. And then the person, once they do a bath, once they do hygiene and bathing, then they can help out with some things around the house, run some errands, go to the grocery store. But that can't be the main purpose for the PCA.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
You mentioned palliative care. What's the difference between palliative care and hospice?
Well, hospice does have palliative care. What hospice says is that if a person has a terminal diagnosis, to be eligible for hospice, a person has to have a terminal diagnosis. That means that they're expected to die. It used to say within 6 months. Now they've taken that time frame away, but they have to have a terminal diagnosis. If a person has a terminal diagnosis, they have several choices that they need to make. They need to decide whether or not they're going to fight that disease, whether or not they want chemotherapy, radiation, treatments, they want surgery or whatever. If they do that, then they're not eligible for hospice. Palliative care means that they have accepted the diagnosis pretty much, and that if they're going to get radiation, it's only for the purpose of keeping them comfortable. And so they're saying that at this point, we accept this terminal diagnosis and we just want our loved one to be made comfortable. So and then at that point, that's when they're eligible for hospice. And that's called palliative care. Okay. So hospice will send in a nursing assistant in the home, not round the clock, maybe 2-3 hours, depending on what the doctor's orders and the assessment says that the person needs. But they'll send in a nursing assistant to help with some of that personal care for that person. And I can tell you that with my mother, when she did get the nursing assistant from hospice, that really is what really helped us a lot and gave my father a lot of relief, because he didn't have to do that daily bathing and the laundry and things like that. That really helped him a great deal. Okay. So that's one of the options, is that the person receives care at home. The other option is that the person can move in with family or friends. Okay, and I think that if you're thinking about this option, you need to make sure that you understand that it's a very serious step, and that you need to make sure that both you and your loved one agree to this. Okay, it depends on, whether this is the right thing for you to do. It really does depend on what your situation is, whether you are with your family and you still have children living at home, whether or not you're working every day, and how attentive, what those needs are of that family member. Will you be able to provide them every day? When a person is elderly and they're used to living their way, and going to bed when they want to go to bed, or it is really very difficult to adjust to somebody else's lifestyle in someone else's house. So it's a serious step for you to make, and you really need to be honest and have real honest discussion on how you're going to handle things and set things up. Okay, I can tell you that one of the things that I wanted to do personally, and I attempted to bring my mother to North Carolina to live with me for a while. And it just didn't work. She came down, and after 2 weeks or so, she was ready. She missed my father so much, she was ready to go right back up there with him. And although the area was one room on the level of the house where she could get around to the kitchen and to a bathroom and all of that, it still left her pretty alone. She felt kind of isolated because she was used to one level where everybody was in that one level and she could see people and she could see things going on. So for her, and being in a busy city, living in a busy city, to come to North Carolina was a real letdown for her because it was a very quiet area. So she didn't really enjoy that, and I ended up having to take her back after a month, having to return her home. Okay. Remember that if that is a decision that you make to have that loved one come and live with you, then you really need to make sure to build in some respite time. Because respite means that you're given, the caregiver gets a break and somebody else takes over that caregiving. So you really need to make sure that you're building in some respite time. North Carolina Assisted Living offers, the other one is, we're going to talk a little bit now more about those other options. So one of the other options might be assisted living facilities. So North Carolina AssistedLiving.org is one of the websites that you might go to. Offers a consumer's checklist that you might want to check out and look at, and it also has all the names of all of the assisted living facilities in this area. They actually have a checklist that you might want to look and take with you when you go to if you were to go to visit different facilities. Facilities within this next group tend to be larger. Okay, I skipped some, okay. Let's talk about a list of the facilities in your area. Also AAA, which is your area agency on aging. They will list the facilities in your area. They list the licensing regulations in your state. And they have information on how you can contact the ombudsman. And the ombudsman is one of the people that goes about to look at complaints from facilities. And it has the availability of the different facilities in the area. Facilities using these names, the following names, tend to be smaller and fewer than 10 patients. Some of those names are personal care homes, sheltered housing, homes for adult, board and care, and senior home groups. These are usually the smaller assisted living facilities, and they're usually with 10 or fewer patients. They usually have shared bathrooms, sometimes shared bedrooms. They can be in communities, like in just traditional homes. These usually cost a little less.
What kind of medical person, are these homes required to have any type of medical personnel coming in at the intervals, or if there's a need? The smaller homes.
The smaller homes, they may not have certified nursing assistants, but they will have some people there that will be trained, that will give care. There will not be necessarily in some of these smaller homes like 24-hour care. So these should be for people who are fairly independent, just need a little bit more structure and somebody to kind of watch over them. But they should, this is not the type of home that you would send a frail elderly person to, or somebody who has a handicap, who needs a lot of attention. So this would be somebody who is almost like living at home, but they just need a little bit, just a little something else. Maybe somebody to cook for them, somebody to help monitor their medications, but they're pretty much on their own. Okay, so the next group is a little bit larger, and they're usually called, they're what we call the assisted living facilities. And they usually have larger groups of anywhere from 20 to 150 patients or more. And these groups are usually the patient has a room or an apartment that is private, a bathroom that is private. They usually eat in a larger dining room area and have a larger common room. And this is what you think of when we talk about, when we talk about the facilities, assisted living facilities. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're especially designed for the frail, elderly person or the persons with disabilities. They're called, you'll see them called residential care facilities, assisted living facilities, adult congregate living facilities, and they usually have around-the-clock care, and they have skilled nursing people on. Okay, the last under the assisted living community would be the larger complexes that offer a variety of options, ranging from independent living to actually skilled nursing home care. And these facilities are designed to actually provide they call it lifetime care within the community. These facilities tend to be a whole lot more expensive, and they are referred to as continuing care retirement communities. You might see some like this. The Star Mount has a big one where they actually have homes and cottages on the grounds. If a person gets, their condition changes, then they're able to move from their independent living home to maybe assisted living where they get a little bit more apartment, but they get a little bit more care. And if their condition continues to deteriorate, they can be moved eventually to a skilled nursing home, and it's all within the same community. So that's called continuing care communities. So, do you have a better idea of how that progress works and what you would need to do, or making some of those decisions as to where you want to go, where you might need to place this patient? A lot of times the decision is made, unfortunately, because of what a person can afford. And that's sometimes, unfortunately, that's the bottom line. But even when you're looking at first what you can afford and looking at that, then you still want to go out and visit these facilities and make sure that within what you can afford, they are still good facilities, because under all price ranges, there are good places out there. You just have to visit them. You have to go around and look at things when you're there. Look at, like I said, that you have this, if you go online, you can get that checklist. But you want to look at when you go into a facility, when you first approach the facility. Look at the facility. Does it look nice? Is it someplace where you would want to live? Is it someplace that you want that loved one, family members to come and see them? When you walk inside, does it look bright and cheery? What does the decor look like? Once you get inside, are there people there to greet you and be very warm, staff there? When you look at the staff and how they interact with the patients, are they calling them by their name? Do they know them well enough to actually call them by their name? That's a good sign if they do. When you see patients on the hall, do they look happy? Are they interacting with each other or talking to each other? So that's another thing. Are there programs or schedules, activities that's offered for them? Those are some of the things that people want. If they want to stay busy, you want to keep the mind stimulated. So that's something that's very important for you to look at. You might want to make sure that you give a look at the menu. How often does the menu change? What kind of things are on the menu? And if that person does not like what's on the menu for that particular day, would they be offered a different selection? Would they have that right to make a different selection? One of the things that I tell my nursing assistant students, that they really need to make sure that the family members look at how they treat each other. And that's a big indication of how well the dynamics are in a nursing facility. Does the staff treat each other with respect? They know they have to treat the patients with respect, but do they treat each other with respect? Usually, people have to work together as a team. And if they treat each other well with respect, then we know that they're a good team and they're going to get their work done. Usually when there's team efforts, there's less of a turnover. And that would be one of the other things that I would ask about, is the turnover. Now, if you decide that you're looking for a nursing assistant to come into the home to help, of course, you can call agencies and have agencies come in, but you can also advertise yourself. If you have an agency come in, of course, you're going to pay a lot more, but you can advertise yourself. And also, when you advertise and you have somebody to come in, make sure that you get a record of their working history. Make sure you get a record of their criminal history. And you can have them bring it, make that a requirement of the employment, that they need to bring that to you. And then you need to interview them. And as you interview them, think in terms of your loved one and whether your loved one is going to be able to get along with that person. And that's important. What I might like, perhaps my loved one wouldn't like. I might like somebody that's going to talk to me all the time because I like to talk. But, if it were my father, he probably wants somebody that's just going to be quiet, come in and do what they need to do and go. So keep in mind the person's personality that you're going to hire this person. Okay, I've talked for a while, and I hope I've given you some of the information that you want, that you might be looking for in terms of getting started. Do you all have any questions? Anybody else have any questions for me?
For the continuing care retirement community, then that is a nursing home and assisted living on one location?
In homes, yes, in homes. They usually have like cottages or independent, when they say independent living, they may have homes, they may have cottages where people can have their own cars, they come and go as they please. And they don't have anybody checking in on them, but somebody's on the grounds, maybe 2 blocks away, so that if somebody feels bad, they can call and say, look, I'm feeling real bad this morning, can you come and check my blood pressure? And somebody is on the grounds, they can come out and do that. But so they have independent living, then they have assisted living, then they have nursing home. So they have all 3 right there for that person. And that's why they call them continuum, because they have everything right